As far back as we have human records, the land the Nahuatl call Anahuac has played a game that used a ball and goals to signify achievement and settle disputes in place of bloody combat. One of the oldest recorded American continental legends of two twin brothers, Juanapu and Jablanque, tells of these two defeating lords of the underworld in order to establish the game's place in overcoming death through glory in sport. This land, now called Mexico, has seen the ancient ball game called poke-to-poke evolve into a new and tenured national passion, introduced in a similar fashion to the blended European native culture, which informs its larger identity. Football is as synonymous with the Mexican experience as with spirituality or resilience, and encompasses both in its application to the populace. The goal being a mythos for life, a poetic narrative in how one sees themselves and others. The ball holding a power to shape one's path. Another medium which curates the national conversation is that of cinema, and while a rich history precedes it, a more recent generation of filmmakers rising to prominence through the 1990s and into today have created not just within Mexico, but globally, an idea of how story can be conveyed. This movement, called Nuevo Cine Mexicano, shows us that the passions of a few talented individuals can create a pride of a people, while also inspiring each other to advance the ball down the field of what can and should be done in visual art. Widely considered to be the primary arbiters of this movement, Guillermo del Toro, Alejandro Gonzalo Iñárritu, and Alfonso Cuarón have collectively ushered in a golden age of Mexican cinema, winning multiple Oscars, each winning Best Director, and garnering respect for their vision, burning to make each other's creative fires even hotter. Friendship self-defining the bedrock of their success, they found a production company in 2007 named Cha 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 Films, and the following year plotted their first collective film as producers. The story would inlay from the tradition of the ball game and importance of family, along with the two actors who have buoyed the various works of the collective, to create a tale which culminated thousands of years of history into a fable of two brothers, much like the Mayan myth preceding it. This month on Club Deportivo Movie Club, we watch Rudo y Cursi.
Club Deportivo Movie Club. Come and join our movie club, where Cesar and Drew have fun. Club Deportivo Movie Club.
Hello and welcome to Club Deportivo Movie Club. I am half of your hosts, Drew Steck, and joining me is my better half, soccer journalist Cesar Hernandez. Cesar, how you doing today, man?
I'm not sure if I agree with the better half, but I'm doing well. Friday, even though Fridays, because of what I do in the soccer world, Fridays are sometimes Mondays or Tuesdays for me. But I'm always like in a good mood on a Friday nonetheless. But yeah, happy, chilling, and looking forward to talking about the next movie here.
We release on Fridays, we record on Fridays. We try to bring that Friday vibe for you. And joining us on this very special second episode, bringing them in a little earlier than we might other guests, but they are special guests to us as they are hosts of our network that we provide this show on. We have Mr. Tony Sanchez and Alejandro Villaseñor, Mr. Chiva. How you guys doing?
How's it going? Pretty good. Happy Friday. I'm excited.
Yeah.
This movie is a movie I've been waiting to watch for a while.
This is a little weird being a guest in my own garage.
That's true.
Like,
That is true.
like it's
A guest on your own network. You guys are also executive producers, so kind of guests,
do we
but
get
also behind the scenes with the show as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
you get an EP credit.
Yeah, okay, cool. Get the
So.
parking for it. All right, I'm okay
Perfect.
with that. No, this is really
Parking's
cool.
covered.
Thank you for inviting us. This is exciting stuff, and I love what you guys are doing with all this.
Appreciate it, dudes, and thanks for having us on your show to promote this last month. We'll keep this rolling. We'll try and check in on the show every once in a while just to kind of give a preview, let your audience know, and mix these two communities. One of the things that we found since the initial pilot release of this was
a pretty cool community that's sprung up around not just your show, but this show as well, and wrapped its arm around the idea of watching soccer movies together. I've had a ton of great feedback, Cesar. How about yourself? It seems like most people are just really excited to see what movie we're going to do next and be able to watch it with us.
So it was really interesting. So I went to a fan event for SDFC semi recently, and it was interesting that a handful of people came up to me and like, "Oh, hey," and I thought like sometimes people will recognize me out in the wild and will talk about articles or work they've done, but like a handful of people were like, "I'm really excited about the movie club. I'm really excited about the next week. What are you guys doing next with the movie club?" I was like, and it wasn't just one person; it was a handful of different people. So that was super cool to see that. Hopefully, you're all enjoying this so far. I recognize it's early days too, so please let us know once again what you want to see from the podcast. As I said last time with Drew, like we see this, it's not just ours, it's yours. So please let us know what you would like to see, what you enjoy, what you dislike. I'm really, really curious what people have to say. But yeah, thanks early on for all that early support.
Yeah, this is our podcast, as in the Royal Hour. It's everybody's
Yeah,
who
exactly.
cares to interact and have fun with us. They've already given us some great ideas for new rating systems, for new ways of viewing these films, and a few film ideas along with it. And we're looking forward to creating more outlets for this, more of a community around SanDiego.Futbol as well. So all of that will be coming in the next few months, and we'll find different ways to maybe get you films that are harder to watch, or maybe give you access to films in a way that you can watch them along with us a little bit easier than having to chase them down. One of the things I found kind of funny was some people have said they're actually going to put together viewing parties possibly together, which I think is
Yeah,
really
so
cool in
cool.
San Diego.
Yes.
So I'm sure Cesar and Tony Chiva will all try and join you in the San Diego area. Maybe I'll try and put a few together in Wisconsin where I am. And one of the ways you can do
Let's
that,
say, what can't you do, Drew?
I
What's
can, I can fly
what's
out.
happening? Just
I'll be
just
out
a
there a
short
couple
flight
times a
away.
year, and we'll definitely try and hold bigger
It's like
ones when I'm out
I
there.
think that's
Um,
the eventual film festival that's going to sprout from this locally. I
that's right.
mean, whenever you come down to San Diego, that's when it is. Semi-annually, double annually, whenever you're here.
Eventually, we may make a movie together. I don't. Maybe this is all just prep for us to find a million ways not to make a light bulb,
Don't.
and then make our own light bulb. I don't know. One of the fun things I did find from the last time we recorded is we talked so much about how Goal was very hard to find on streaming.
Mhm.
Yes.
Last week, I get this commercial watching EPL. Hey, look at what's coming on our platform. Goal, the dream begins. Weird how
Look at the influence that we already have.
within a
Look at
month.
the influence we already have.
Incredible.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
already bringing the movies to the masses. So if you're on Peacock, you want to catch up with episode 1, that's a real easy way to get a nice high quality version. And again, we'll maybe find new ways to bring that to you as well. And to be fair, I've also gotten some pushback on the stack deck. We will continue stack decking. Today's film actually has a great narrative that I honestly didn't find a lot of holes in. So maybe there isn't one today. But I did get a couple comments about possibly where you wouldn't have had the exact type of thought I had from last month's. But check it out for yourself. Always let us know. And again, we love the interaction. So with too much more, I think we just want to dive in, guys. Right? I mean, this movie is going to take up a long time. Our goal with this podcast is to try and not be longer than the runtime of a film itself. This movie ran in about 108 or 108 minutes, I believe, or 103 minutes for this one. So we'll try and keep it under an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. Maybe we'll go over if we're having too much fun. Who knows? But today's film is Rudo y Cursi, directed by Carlos Cuarón, starring Diego Luna and Gael Garcia Bernal. A production team that worked together on Y Tu Mama Tambien and in multiple facets of Nuevo Mexicana cinema. You have, for any of the gringos in the audience, essentially the movement that created Guillermo del Toro, Alfonso Cuarón, Alejandro Inarritu. So you have these filmmakers who all won Oscars, right? The brother of one of those guys, and this was actually the first film that they put together a production company together called Cha 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 Films, and this was the first movie they decided to release under that banner. So obviously something that felt close to their hearts as a story they wanted to tell and get out there. And I think for everybody involved with the film, you can easily tell just leading up to it from a production standpoint, they really wanted to tell this story. In terms of just films overall and just kind of setting the table a little bit like that we'll like to do with our guests, and we did last time with Cesar and I, Tony and Chiva, is there sports films? Is there movies overall that shape your viewing process? And then how did you consume Rudo y Cursi? I'm guessing you've seen it possibly before, but maybe not. And then how did you watch it this time?
So this was actually a point of contention when we started the podcast. There are things that have come up between these 4 years and just conversations, right? And at some point it goes into like soccer movies. It's like, hey, so what's your? Do you like this movie? Do you like this movie? Okay, yeah. And it always came down to Chiva.
No.
Did you like Rudo y Cursi?
I loved it. I have
No.
Oh,
But before you just,
I had never seen it.
and that's the one thing that I always told you, and I don't steer you wrong. If I recommend something to you, and look, if I send something to you on Instagram, you have to watch it. It's must watch. I don't send things, but if it's there, you have to. If I recommend something, you have to. And I'm glad you got there, Chiva. Finally.
Thank you.
Thanks to this podcast and this Club Deportivo
I've
Movie
waited
Club.
for this moment. I waited for the right time, I would say, to officially watch Rudo y Cursi for the first time. And I don't regret it.
I love that. I watched it in Cinépolis in Tijuana, in La Plaza Rio. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Drew. Just Plaza Bonita, but Mexico. But I watched it with my family. If you can refresh my memory, what was the year of this?
2008.
2008.
2008.
Yeah.
2008. Yeah.
I'm a ripe old age of 16, just a prepubescent kid. He was hanging out with his whole family. We would go to the newspaper to see what's movies on for that day, and we choose one, and that one came up. We'll get later into why that may have been a problem with an entire family and my 2 younger sisters present for that.
They're probably just like, "Hey, soccer movie. This will be fun." All right. Let's
Yeah.
Our 2 of our biggest stars culturally, great, all of that. But yeah, there's a few elements in this that are not family friendly. It does have a film rating of R in the United States, and I'm sure something similar south of the border. But it is one of those where I would say not something to let the kids, or probably somebody under 13 maybe experience without too much prefacing of that, or maybe watching a TV edit might be for them in that sense. But you won't get all the glory, and I'd say just really the grittiness of the film that really makes it what it is. For me, I experienced it in film school at that time, Tony, in 2008. So I was kind of right when it came out, and went to go watch it with a few film school friends. I hadn't really fully breached the soccer mindset in my life of being a massive fan. So kind of understood it, but this time coming back at it with fresh eyes, I watched it, I think once since, but kind of half watched it. And then this time I consumed it a few times, as I tend to do for the show. And I also listened to the director's commentary, which itself is kind of quirky and fun. And I'll get to at some point in the podcast. But Cesar, how did Rudo y Cursi find you?
So I was not studying film like you in college. I was studying psychology, but I did actually see it in theaters. Actually, it was interesting. I was 20, and a friend of mine was really into the movie and invited me to go see it. I didn't know that it was like a thing. I didn't know anything about the movie. I think this friend, she just invited me just because she knew that I loved Mexican soccer. And that movie, when I saw it for the first time, it blew me away. And since then, I've watched it a handful of times, maybe 5, 6, 7 times. It's kind of one of those movies that I don't know, when I first started dating, my wife, when she was my girlfriend, it was definitely one of those first movies that I showed her. But yeah, this was one of those movies. I know we talked about the podcast that I feel like I need to catch up with a lot of soccer movies, but this one was one that I actually saw in theaters. And yeah, no, I mean, we'll get into it later, but I absolutely loved it then, and I still really love it now.
It is one of those. Did it feel like for you and your wife in particular that this was one where it's if she doesn't like it, this isn't going to work out kind of thing, or this is core to who I am?
Yeah.
Okay.
Divorce papers ready. Yes. No. I had those ready actually while we were watching the film. Actually, yeah.
I can't wait for of this.
She starts
episode.
Laughing. Yeah.
Oh, watch this. Yeah.
Yeah.
We should have the wives commentary of our episodes at some point,
Yeah.
where they go back and rewatch our episodes and talk about how stupid we are. That'd be fantastic. We should definitely do that. So yeah, that's setting the stage here a little bit. I gave you some of the production elements. One of the fun things about this film is I tried to find a budget. There is no budget. This is one of the weird movies where like they don't tell you, because I think a lot of it was either off the books or true to the nature of the film. Who knows and who cares? But it was still, it still is. It was one of the highest grossing films of Mexican cinema history. It is currently 19th on that list. And then in America, pretty respectable for an art house film, $11.2 million box office. Pretty impressive for 2008 standards, where ticket prices were still $7 to $8 a piece. Imagine that, a world where that was the case. But still a pretty large amount of people. I think it was over 30 million Mexicans watched it in theater as well. So that's a pretty sizable chunk of people who consume this film and obviously love this movie, and actually more than Y Tu Mama Tambien, which has much higher critical praise and lasting in terms of how it's lived, I'd say, outside of that sphere. But same team that went behind that one, that reunited about 9 years later to make this movie. In terms of just kind of the jumping into it plot wise, we open in a banana plantation after a nice little soliloquy by our narrator, who we later find out to be our kind of agent of chaos and agent of will in the film, but giving us a nice story about how brothers and people have used sport as a way of coming together. In my intro, you'll hear something similar along those same veins of, since the beginning of time, especially Mesoamerican people, Mexican people, have looked to sport as a way to emotionally put themselves out there and also to solve disputes. And jumps us right back into that banana plantation that I just mentioned. Actually, the Cuaron family banana plantation, if you believe it or not. So it's actually their plantation. So that's where, again, the budget kind of gets stretched here a little bit. And we meet our characters. How did you guys feel upon obviously revisiting this, but seeing these characters and maybe knowing where they end up, but jumping into the beginning of the movie and seeing where we start? I'll go to Chiva for this one, since Chiva, this is your initial viewing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely kind of like hits home, right? Like you see that and you're like, yeah, there's people that are out there just working like to live, and they're out here just at the banana plantation. It's funny, like Mexicans are always known to talk a lot of smack, and even at work, this guy's telling him like, no, don't run with the bananas, you're gonna bruise them. Like, it's just that kind of like banter that's just everywhere. It doesn't even matter if it's at the workplace.
No,
and it's banter between brothers too, right? Yeah. Like it's a banter that's the big point. That's the big theme that we've obviously going on later in the movie. I mean, I don't want to reveal too much about my thoughts on the overall movie, but I feel like it establishes early on. It's like, yes, this is a soccer movie, but it's also a movie about family and brothers. But sorry, Todd, you're about to say something there.
No, I mean, like everything that you're saying is true, and then just the fact that it's so genuine already. I texted the group chat when I saw it. I'm like, damn, I'm crying. It wasn't at the end. It wasn't at the middle part. It was at the opening. The opening soliloquy, just the images, just having lived through soccer that way. That's my lens. Not necessarily the rancho, the plantation, the farm that we'll get to here in a bit, but it was also genuine because I've been there. I know people there. I know people in Ensenada who have a rancho that look exactly like that. I've played in those same exact dirt fields where just strangers come and watch, and it's a neighborhood entertainment.
And the field in La Cuenca Lechera.
Oh man, like it really just fills me with such joy. When I first watched this, I knew that this was going to be really good right here. I'm like, yes, that's us. Like, that's me right now. Like, that was so crazy to be able to feel that and feel represented. I still haven't had a similar experience in a movie theater than I had at that moment. And this is a big movie for me, as you can tell. It's a huge movie. But I mean, it's really genuine. And I commend you, Drew, because we watched two different movies, because I understand the movie face value. Everything that they said was spoken. I understand when people who speak Spanish might not understand when it gets to and like that's
why there's subtitles.
Very true. Even with the
I did watch it. I watched it twice through balloons. I watched it twice through with subtitles once, but the second time without. And I understand about 70% of back and forth. There's a lot of slang in there too, so that's the stuff I just don't know because I haven't experienced or talked enough in my life in Espanol. But for me, I would say for me, I'm starting to understand that other way, because the first time I viewed it, definitely viewed it through a fully gringo lens. I'd say this time, especially seeing like the goal drawn on the wall, right, as one of the images they show in the opening sequence, and like I've done that now. I've created street soccer in a place where it's a heavy Mexican presence, and tried to understand the game from that level. And I think like that's where for me I'm starting to pick up why this means so much. And to the point of juxtaposing our first movie to this movie, uh, that was a fully inauthentic story, right? And we picked apart it, and certain people love that
Right.
movie,
Yeah.
and that's great. And I love a Disney movie too, right? That was the Disneyfication of this story, right? In terms of how far you could go being picked out of a crowd and blah blah blah. This is I'd say the more authentic version of that story, right? Both from a Mexican standpoint, and then also from just a sport standpoint. Like, this is why people love sport, isn't because of getting to the top division or playing in big games. It really is more about the people and their love of it, right? And their love of the community that pops up around it, and playing it with your brother, that kind of stuff that really builds it. And especially culturally, I think spoke to me in a different way
It's,
this time.
and it's a complete 180 from the last movie too, because it feels like there's more layers to this too. And even though it is a soccer movie, even though it is a movie about brothers, one of the soccer players themselves, Tato, like it's obvious that what he wants actually is just he wants a career in singing, and that's established early on. And like that's also like there are different levels to this, and yes, he does end up playing professional soccer, but the thing that he wants to chase is that singing career. And it is quite funny that like within, I want to say like the first 10 minutes, he's already saying 2 or 3 times
Right.
within
To move to the second
within the
scene,
movie.
we go
But
to their family, right? And they're sitting around the table, which is,
yeah,
I feel like a fully authentic scene. It feels like I've actually been lucky enough to experience that with, some of my Mexican friends, and eating with their families like that. And it feels like, hey, that's the way it is. And sometimes you get in fights, sometimes there's jokes, but there's a lot of emotion thrown out there, especially, hey, I'm going to move to Texas and be a singer, like whatever. And it's like, so yeah,
yeah,
look at the movie. He has no intention of really playing professionally, even though he's very gifted on the field and a good player. But yeah, it is really interesting that it is one of those things where these characters, it's layered. I'd say it's a layered commentary on Mexican culture, on not just sport, but also all levels of Mexican culture in terms of government, celebrity, all these kinds of things that it layers in there just in subtle ways, and then not so subtle ways sometimes. And obviously gambling, which we'll get to, but there's a lot of subtext here in a way that Goal was just a very linear story about kid
yes.
with it's the dream we all have. I get discovered and I end up in the World Cup or whatever. Like, that's, the 5-year-old's version of playing on the playground. This is the adult version, right? When you get to 16 or 17, you realize, oh, this is the road I actually have to walk to do this thing, or make ends meet, or get where I want to be. And this is my escape from that thing, right? That I have to do every day. But let's advance and push the story forward here. We end up at our first game, which is, as Tony mentioned, if you want to set the scene, Tony, in terms of how you feel about this dirt match on a dirt field that you said you played in before. How did you feel about this match and how it was portrayed?
I mean, as genuine as it gets. I mean, it's a built-in fan base with a tire shop nearby. You just know that there's an establishment of a little tiendita, a little store ran by some lady that's just upselling Doritos, which at that time had Pogs of, I'm just trying to think, 2008. We had like Yu-Gi-Oh Pogs or
Mucha lucha,
SpongeBob,
maybe?
Mucha Lucha maybe at that point. So this is again as genuine as it gets, and a motif to go to your world, Drew. I'm there. A motif that I really find enjoyable is that layeredness of this. It's almost like a mole of a film where you can, on the surface value, it's delicious, but you start thinking about it like, oh, there's this note of this. But if you really dig into it, there's so many more layers to those ingredients that have certain ways to be. A certain chile needs to be cooked this way and prepared this way to even be an ingredient for the mole. If you look at just the scenes and how they're structured, you can really feel that there's that love of Mexico and understanding. Having a maquinita, a arcade in your home of a soccer game is every man's dream to this day.
Yeah.
to this day. The inflation of tortillas goes up because it's a sun tax. It's 5 pesos for a kilo of tortillas, but it went up to 6 because now you get to use 2 pesos to play maquinitas and play Metal Slug or King of Fighters or something. Either way, this is all genuine. This game is as pictured, like no sepia tone needed here. Like you'll find this right now. You can go right now and find this exact game being played. And I mean, it's really just beautiful.
It's one of those games where, I mean, they meet this agent, right? And like, it turns out to be a soccer agent, and he's like, he has to wait for his car to get fixed. So he gets the kid and he's like, hey, go buy me a 6-pack.
Yeah.
And it's like, that happens. And he's just chilling, watching the game. And he just discovers talent. And he asks people,
it's the happenstance of talent, right? And Tato thinks he's a singing agent, right? He doesn't even think he's a soccer agent at first. He's just like, oh, an agent? Well, watch me play, and then we'll talk about my singing career afterwards.
Which once again reinforces the idea that just like his North Star is becoming like a musician. It's not that the soccer is just secondary. Soccer, you could even say soccer could possibly be tertiary, but his North Star is singing. But as we'll soon see, he's the one that gets the opportunity thanks to a penalty.
Yeah, and that's where we get to at the end of the match. He says, "You guys are both great. It's destiny that we're here together." We'll figure out the motivations of this character a little further on in terms of maybe why he does what he does in terms of picking these guys out of nowhere and the fictional village here of La Naranja. It's set in a fictional place, but a very real, as we've said, place as to where people come from. But the idea being that it's any town, Mexico, right? It's Main Street, USA, if you will, but little town, Mexico. And then in that sense, hey, how do we settle this? You guys want to flip a coin? Do you guys want to fight it out? How do you want to figure this out? And Beto, Rudo says, penal, let's do a penalty. I'm the keeper. I feel like I can stop him. And he's my littler brother, so I feel like I can muscle him into doing what I want. And Tony, where did you feel like in terms of as a goalkeeper, you and Chiva, penalty on the line here, your podcast brother, how would you take this moment, I guess, and then how do you feel about the moment that ensues here?
I 100% throughout this film back every single soccer decision that Rudo takes on, as it is the most accurate portrayal of a goalkeeper that I've seen in many ways, right? Rudo is synonymous to I actually remember the game before I went to watch this that same day in the morning. I accidentally hard tackled a opposing player. And then, that's something that Rudo is a nickname for a reason, the heel in a sense in wrestling terms. But I mean, that's what it is. Like, that's street law. That's street justice, a penalty kick. Like, hey, who won? It's a tie. All right, fine. One goal gana, penalty. Like, that's how a goalkeeper just lives. And just that psychology is already embedded in the character, where it's almost as if, and again, I don't know the background, as if this is the natural positions for him. Like, yeah, of course he's a goalkeeper. He played as a goalkeeper growing up all his life. Like, I felt seen. I felt very seen here, even with what ends up ensuing, just a tragedy. Tragedy after.
Mexico's very well known for, just the number of talented goalkeepers that came out, right? Yeah, very few. I think just Ochoa that made it to Europe. But there's always been a very much talented pool of goalkeepers coming from Mexico. Mm-hmm. So it is pretty cool seeing someone come from the beginning up. It's so funny that it's such an older brother thing to do. I feel telling your little brothers like, hey, shoot it to the right. Like, this is my dream. I want this, right? And little brother shot it to the right.
Did you feel any of this? I mean, did you feel it? I'm sorry, guys, but did you feel any of this?
I'm sorry,
like,
but
I'm Rudo and you're Cursi?
If you tell me shoot it to the right, I'm gonna shoot it to my right.
I was gonna say, is like, do you think I don't know why, like, I could actually see a situation in which Tony goes up to Chiva. Tony's like, he's like, Chiva, there's one credential, and I want you to shoot it to the right.
Yeah, and we've done that. There's things we've decided on.
I mean, back for Loyal season 2 after COVID, they were only crediting one person.
There were crediting one person, and
that's right.
We
you should
take turns.
But yeah, no,
That's
definitely.
the guests inspire the film, inspire the guests, in this way. Perfect in booking for us, but we wouldn't have it any other way with you guys.
There you go.
I mean, I think it's
So.
just funny, right? Because I mean, I think Rudo's also mad at himself, saying like, I should have specified.
Yeah, no, that's
My
on me.
right.
I understand.
Oh,
Rudo.
yeah.
Rudo is justified in his
Yeah.
anger, in his shit talking too. Like, this is excellent, just cinema. Like, this is yes. Just keep talking. Even you're mad before, you're mad after. It was on you, but
Because he's a
it's
very
still, like,
emotional person. You know, he's very emotional. He has a lot of pent up aggression, and he doesn't take shit.
Keepers are the way, right? Keeper mentality. I think to your point,
That is goalkeepers. They're weird.
Yeah.
Goalkeepers are kind of odd. They're the odd man out. They're a little. They tend to be a little bit of the strange characters within soccer teams. I don't think that's like strange at all for Rulo to be this like aggressive, physical kind of character. Like that's kind of the norm. That's
Right.
kind of like standard for the soccer world.
The believer in me also always feels like that geography shapes people, and in the case of Mexico, the United States, and Canada, this continent, right? Why do we produce way more goalkeepers or high level goalkeepers? Part of that is geography in terms of we're isolated, right? Like in the case of these people, like you're mentally isolated as a goalkeeper. You also feel like, hey, to make it through, I need to excel from this little town or this place that nobody's ever heard of. We're so distant and spread out. I need to make an impression in this one space. It is just one of those things that I think like that's why we do it almost more than European countries where they might have more exposure to the game at a younger level, especially with their feet and things like that. But just shot stopping ability, use of hands, obviously the sports we play alternative to football, but like I would say it is interesting.
Mexicans and Americans both love baseball, so
right, we do.
Baseball's not exactly a big sport.
No, but it's one of those things where I think that there's something to
Europe,
that in terms of the psychology, the geography, all of it mixes together. And as Tony said, like I think Rudo here is like a goalkeeper's goalkeeper, right? He is just mentally all the way through that guy. And that plays itself out in several different things where he thinks he can't lose. He's got the fix it. He's got the right system. He's got the right idea as the film plays on. And it leads to ultimately his downfall, but he never sees it as I failed. He just sees it as, things came up wrong on me, right? And that's always the case. And that's where he's mad, but at the same time knows things just didn't work out the way they were supposed to, right? It was supposed to work out the other way. But Tato goes to Mexico City, play for one of the many clubs in Mexico City. For those unfamiliar, a lot like London, has many clubs up and down the pyramid, which now is fixed or unfixed depending on the status of Liga MX at the moment. And I'm sure
that's a podcast in itself to dive into the complexities of the Mexican soccer pyramid and why it looks like that.
It is what it is, but it is one of those things where we are given the chance for Tato to phase into a Liga MX top division side, comes in, but it's not all glamorous, right? You're in the reserves, right? As we found with goal as well, like you're not straight into the first team, you're there and you have to share a flat with 4 dudes. And there might be some shower hazing as well, right? Like all of this hits us pretty in the face, like within 5 minutes of him getting to the big city. It's the shine is taken off the dream right away.
Nowadays with Mexican soccer, I mean, who knows if there's stuff that's like undisclosed that players are doing behind the scenes, but like there is a shaving hazing that is done in Mexican soccer these days, but what it tends to be is them just shaving the heads. And like you'll see that sometimes, like if you're ever watching a Mexican soccer game and there's a 3-digit player who's coming on who's bald but they're like 17 years old, it's because more than likely they were brought into the first team and doing a little bit of hazing there. Maybe some other stuff happens behind the scenes, I'm not entirely sure, but yes, there's some at least in this movie, some pretty bad hazing.
But it's real. Like anybody who's ever been on a sports team knows that that team mentality. That if one where goes one goes all, and they do these things right where everybody gangs up on the new guy and make sure that you're assimilated into the Borg, as it were, to use a Star Trek term. But we're given a very upfront look at that, and then a second turn on that in a little bit as well. But Beto's left home stewing. One of the scenes things that just hit me was him watching Tato leave and just staring out the door, but not enough to say anything, just to say this sucks and watch this moment, and then chew on that and really not feel like, I really need to get there. But eventually Tato still feels for his brother and says like, "Hey, we should probably get this guy out of here. If there's anything you can do or any job you can get him, please do that." As he starts to move into his own space, and the agent very quickly finds a way for him to do that, and we find out why, which is that the agent has stakes in players everywhere and also cuts in the coaches as well. And this is our first taste of corruption, as it were, in terms of a little bit of a glimmer of this when we're first seeing Tato along with the coach at, I think it was Puma's training ground, which is very beautiful.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful training ground in Mexico City. Actually, in order to get through that training ground, you actually have to go through this like rocky tunnel.
Cool.
But actually, what I'm curious to ask about, like Tony and Chiva, maybe we'll go to Chiva, since I'm also curious, since this was the first time that you're watching this. But like, I think at this point for me, I think, okay, in my mind at least, I'm establishing Rudo as more the bad guy, if you will, and Cursi is kind of the nice guy. What I mean by that is like early on, remember when they were like when they were getting on the truck, when they were like going back to head back home after working at the plantation, like Cursi like puts out the stick. Obviously, he makes a phallic joke when he puts out the stick, but he helps like Rudo like get on the truck, and he like helps, or not get on the truck, but like pulls him up on the right side of the truck, by the way. But also in this situation, Cursi, he doesn't have to push for his brother, but he does decide to push for his brother to join and to help him and to eventually join a team. But like, did you kind of see that a little bit too? Where like, were you rooting for one player or more at the other at this point? I'm really curious.
I think personally, I felt more for Rudo in a way.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
I mean, I have an
Okay,
older brother. I
okay.
know what it's like to look up to your older brother and whatever. But I mean, as a younger brother, a Mexican brother, you're always gonna want to help out your big bro, because you want that validation from
Right.
them. Just like, hey, like accept me, right?
Right.
But I felt for Rudo just because you can tell how much more he wants to become a pro soccer player. You know, he's just as
Right.
good in his
Yes.
position.
This is a soccer movie in the end.
And
Yeah.
it sucks because the younger brother is always better than the bigger brother. Like we see it. I mean,
Mhm.
like everywhere. Like usually the younger brother is more talented than the older brother, and I mean it
Right.
just happens to be the case here too. But I feel for Ruda just going down to having to play poker and just gambling, and he has those
Right.
addictions in a way that can also keep him from getting to where he wants to go.
That's interesting, because I also think that kind of like highlights once again the layers and like complications of the movie. Where in my mind, I'm kind of rooting for one person. Now maybe I'm not thinking about it from a soccer perspective, but from you watching it, you're like, no, 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 no. I'm feeling for the guy who isn't given his opportunity here. Like I really find that interesting.
I mean, I see. I mean, again, incredible bias with the goalkeeping position. Like that's hands down. Like that's not going to change. Let me just go with that, right?
You're just Team
Yeah,
Bruno no matter what.
like
We're
You're like
listening
at the end, you're like, you know what?
and I can almost justify it in a Walter White sort of way, in an anti-hero
Right.
sort of sense, where like I don't justify the means, but the desire is there. And again, like for me at this particular point in time in my life was when I had just almost kind of decided, am I going to continue to play? And at this point, I had a couple of visorías, a couple of tryouts with some of the teams, the Cruz Azul, Tecos, just
See.
coming in. This is true. This is true. It's been fact checked. But just like that reality of my teammates also having to go to El DF, and then they come back to your team, your club team, and it's like, hey, how was it? And they're like, well, I just kind of live with these three dudes, and this is exactly what the reality of this was. So again, the realism of all of this, and again, I still find myself rooting for Rudo throughout, because again, like he wants it more, and I really felt that. I felt like, do I want this? Do I want this as much as that? To the degree of, at that point, my family and I always played poker together. My grandparents, my parents, we had our little Ziploc bag of nickels and dimes and pesos. 1 peso equals 1 dime. 2 dimes equals 1 peso. Like that's buy in, buy out, right? But it got to a point where I kind of got good, and I would raise and raise and raise when I knew, mathematically speaking, there was no way for me to lose. And so they stopped playing with me. They're like, we're just not going to play with you. It's not fun anymore, right? And so like this was like
That's when your
weeks
family-
prior to this. Like again, this is a very personal movie for me, and it really hits a lot of aspects that I didn't even think of, and having to rewatch this. Right? I didn't experience any hazing, but
No.
Yeah.
That was crazy. But I think as soccer fans, you root for the guy that does like soccer. Like you said, like
Right.
Cursi wants to be a musician. Like he's even at
Yeah.
the tryout
Yes.
and tells the agent, "Hey, like, yeah, the tryout's cool, but when can you help me out with the music stuff?"
Yeah, when's my music career happening? When am I getting in the studio? Right? Like when's this?
Yeah.
And anybody knows, especially American football players, know for this, where they have like a track come out. 99% of those are terrible. Maybe 1%, the exception proves the rule, but almost all of them are always terrible. You don't see it a lot in other sports, but you do see it here in American football. You see it obviously sometimes in soccer. Clint Dempsey, shout out on your music career. You'll go up and look at it. It's friggin' terrible, but hilarious. Cesar, what's your take on that?
Actually, I was just saying, I thought Dempsey's rapping wasn't that bad, but but I guess what's
He's got swagger.
what is good to see
He definitely has swagger. I'll give him
for
that. He's got the
for
the feel of a rapper, even though he is just a foremost forward for the U.S.
But for the good news for Chiva and Tony, and for the viewers who are rooting for Rudo to get his opportunity, he is eventually invited to get to the city and try his luck with a second division team. And for those who know about Mexican soccer, they know that the second division is brutal. There's, and what I mean by that is that there's a big difference between first division Mexican soccer and second division. Maybe the very, very worst of the worst of Liga MX. I would say maybe they're probably on par with what's happening in the second division, but it is not the same level of investment. It is not the same level of focus, if you will, when it comes to soccer. So, Rudo does get his opportunity. And of course, Rudo, big Rudo, he injures someone in the first training. There are already question marks about him, but Rudo has to pay his dues. Yeah. And then as we'll eventually learn too, like he also learns the difficulties of the Mexican soccer world, where he questions a manager and gets punished as well. But Tony, it sounded like you're about to say something.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's why I love the moments of this movie where you realize, oh, it's a movie, right? Those magical instances where, Tato's told like, hey, you got to score. You got to get on the first team to get this music deal to begin with. Boom, 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 boom. And then with Rudo trying out. So why do they call him Rudo? Sound effects.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Background. And then cut to that. So like, yeah. It's again, a really good but fun interpretation of all of this. There's a levity to all of it, but it's a grounded levity where it's, again, every scene in this movie I've seen in some sort of fashion before, having lived through a even remote experience of soccer. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows a swindler, or everybody knows, in my case, el papá del coach, who paid a little bit more to pay for the uniforms, that now he's the first keeper and
that's
I'm
how it works in Mexico.
Like,
that's how
it's a pay to play. Like that's
how it works
handshakes.
It
is 100%. And I mean, what's interesting for Rudo is like his contract, right? It's like you only get paid if you start. Like even if you're on the bench, you're not getting paid.
Yeah.
So you need to become a starter eventually. Whereas if you're in first division, you're getting paid regardless if you're starting or not. Yeah, there may be bonuses, but for Rudo, he had to start in order to get paid.
And that's that.
And it's you don't even have to like look that far. And you're like, oh, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's you, man. Run with it, Cesar. I pass you the ball.
I would say like really. Oh, thank you for the best. That's a wonderful through ball, actually. Yeah. But what's really interesting is like you for someone who's watching this and thinking like, and who maybe doesn't know a lot about Mexican soccer, they're thinking it's like, oh, is there really like shady stuff like that? Well, we can say like confidently, maybe it's not specific to what you're seeing in this movie, but it is not out of the ordinary to hear about players having double contracts.
No, there's no corruption.
Maybe you're getting Yeah. You might have a contract with a team, but then you have another contract with the league, and it's supposed to somehow compensate for your full payment. And Xolos, there have been, I forget the exact player who it was, but there was a player who said that they once got paid with like money, like in a big bag, and it was just brought to them, and hey, this is how you're getting paid. There is no lack of. It is very interesting. Let's just say that, and maybe it isn't specific to what was happening in the movie, but it isn't out of the ordinary for the Mexican soccer world to see examples of really sketchy things going on. Let's just say
It's
that.
it's a
It
Simpsons
seems to
skit
be.
where it's
Oh, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
line
yeah.
where it's Lionel Hutz and Phil Hartman as a lawyer. Yeah, what do you want to hear? Do you want the truth or do you want the truth? So all sports, unfortunately, but sorry about that, Drew. Go for it.
No, it's all sports, man. I would say it's not just exclusive to Mexico, but it is the things you hear of in like Liga MX where you're like, how can this exist? Even our own
Yeah.
experience as a San Diego centric podcast, even though we're here for the world, with our Liga MX team, Tijuana Cholos, uh, you get some fun stuff happening there, right? We won't elaborate too much on that, but I'll just say like there's a crazy amount of stuff going on there, specifically in how the team was created, where they've gotten to, how they've gotten there, where the money comes from, all of that stuff. You don't want to read too much into if you want to remain a fan or not, get too deep into ethics, if you will, when it comes to soccer in the top division there, when it comes to specifically money, where it comes from and how things are put together. So, but that's true if you look at the EPL. I mean, you have nation states taking over teams, you have corporations running teams. Same in the US where, the local MLS club is, maybe dubious in terms of some of its funding and where it comes from as well. So, at all levels, there's paying $500 million to get into a league in the first place is fucked up. So like, let's just call it what it is. Like no league is spared this, but this is a specific, I'd say Mexican flavor, if you will, of corruption that takes place in terms of double contracts, things that happen with players, how you cut in people, how you game the system to ultimately get where you are. And if you don't play the system, you're never going to get where you want to be. And that's true of almost any league in the world is you gotta play the way they want you to play. And whether that's football, whether that's baseball here, in America is very much, a similar way of like, you gotta kind of do it the way they want you to do it. Even trying to go through college into the pros is still more difficult than just going into AAA and trying to work your way through the system they want the way they want you to. Things like that, right? That I would say just from my own experience personally, like there is definitely other levels to this for most sports. Wrestling, for instance, is like very corrupt in a lot of ways. Like, so like there's all versions of this, but I just want to point out like this movie calls to, I think specifically the through line that happens in the country in which it takes place, that it feels very real because it is to all of us, whether or not you're from that culture or you just have an analog to something else that So one of those things is that Beto loves to bet on stuff, which being his name is kind of silly and fun and probably a wink as well at the camera. And actually gets his way back in after a backroom deal with the agent. At a cockfight, which actually that scene isn't in the England version. So if you watch this movie in England, when it came out, they removed it for inhumane animal treatment. So if you watch this in a cinema in England, cut that scene out due to their laws, which is always kind of interesting how that stuff works, especially being the colonizers they are, and things that they pushed on the world. But whatever, we'll digress. So just the thing I always like to see is like,
well, what's interesting is that it all.
Go ahead, Cesar.
I listen that all like what you're all just saying there. It kind of ties into the reason why everybody's involved in this, why the reason why the players themselves and the clubs, and why there is this investment. There is a, if you will, it's a gamble, right? And it pays off for a moment for Cursi, and it pays off for Rudo. Cursi, the club, or just like, you know what, like, and it was kind of funny. This is when he was like, at the moment when he's like a little unhappy about his like nickname, because Cursi, I guess it's kind of like. I'm curious how you guys would translate it, because it's not a common. I wouldn't say it's a common nickname, but I would say it's like cheesy or like soft,
Yeah.
soft,
Corny,
cheesy, yeah.
corny.
Yeah, okay, because it's not like a common like nickname, but like,
Like
but
curious,
this is
like it's
when he gets
It's like
yeah,
silly in a
like
way.
odd.
yeah,
Like there's different
maybe silly is like a better way. Yeah,
Yeah, no,
but this is when he's given that nickname.
and
Yeah,
those are the nicknames you give in Mexico. Like
Oh yeah.
you have a la cabrita, el chicharito, la pina, everything, right? So it's just silly nicknames that are given to players, and they just get stuck with it the rest of their career, whether they like it or not. I mean, I think there was a player in Chivas, Michael Perez, le decían la torta.
You don't want to be like
tortas, right? Tortas. He, yeah. Or even just like it's interesting too, or even just like trophies, because trophies is kind of like it's like a pet name you have for like a girlfriend, but trophies was given that nickname because they're just like, hey, you kind of look like that guy's girlfriend over there, so we're gonna call you trophies. It's like what? It's like,
the luck of the draw
but
of nicknames. Like it's an important moment in a Mexican's history. So
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and
Oh, yeah.
eventually, like,
But-
you end up seeing like what type of correction takes, right, for Rudo to start, right? It's like, hey, coach, you're gonna get a percentage if you start him, so you get a cut in, and then you also see how his team eventually moves up to first division. I don't know if I'm skipping a little too much, right? But like, that happens in the Mexican league, where teams buy out their way
That's
of
happened
either
before.
now it's you pay a
Yeah.
fine so you don't relegate, and then it happened before where they buy their way up into the first division. So that's definitely, like you said, Tony, the realism of the movie is so spot on.
a Dodge Challenger, not a Challenger, a Dodge. What is it? SUV at that point. That was a great.
I think.
A Durango.
Yeah, I don't know. What
it's a
yeah.
Top
There's
of the
well, and
line
there's
This
funny-
is like I was saying.
Go ahead, Cesar. We all love this movie. Oh my god.
No, it's like
There's
this
so much.
definitely when it like pays off. Yeah. Like this is when it definitely like pays off for everyone. Like I said, that's part of the gamble of Mexican soccer and diving yourself like into this sport, and obviously doesn't pay off for some, and obviously we'll see what happens later in the movie. But you know, this is when Cursi, he's given I think it was like Casa Cursi, he's given a home by the club, and he's it's like a big opportunity for him. Rudo, like his team magically somehow, which obviously this is like it's actually not atypical. It's happened before in Mexican soccer. I think it was Querétaro. I think they took Chiapa's spot, if I remember correctly. I think I want to say it was like 10 or so years ago. Somehow the Nopaleros, like they move up to the first division. Ruda gets this opportunity. Cursi then, for me, and I want to ask you guys, I'm curious, I'll go back to Chiva now, who saw this for the first time. It was part of the ascent for Cursi being able to achieve all his dreams. He then gets a music video with his cover of I Want You to Want Me. And for me, this is my favorite part in the entire movie. I know how you felt about it, but I think that was by far
It
my
was
favorite part.
hilarious, right? Because it's like when players make it, they make commercials, they do this. He wanted this from the start, and it's finally him. Like he gets so excited when he finds out he got this gig to make this song and have this music video, and he goes all out. He sings pretty well, but the music's not that good, if you ask me. I'm like, Tony loves it, but I'm like, no, like what is going on here? And I mean, there's a reason why you're Cursi.
The flavor,
Yeah,
like flamboyant in every single
He's just
way.
as he is,
and
and he's not afraid to show it.
And that's that you see that personality in the type of player he is. You saw when in the cockfighting scene where there was a short glimpse of some dribbling, some soccer, a game Cursi's playing, and he has the flair.
It's the second actual soccer scene we actually see in the whole movie.
It actually
Right.
I know, right?
It's crazy.
The music video might have been logged.
Oh, I was going to pull back the curtain here. So one of the things in the director's commentary, so if you're lucky enough to get a DVD or get a high quality version of this, the director's commentary is not just the director, Carlos Cuarón. It's also Diego Luna and Gael Garcia Bernal. And they are not being themselves in the sense of being themselves as people in this world that we live in. They're being actually Tato y Beto pretending to watch a movie based on their lives. So they're pretending to be the characters in the thing. And one of the things they say is like, there's not very much soccer in this soccer movie. And I was like, oh my God, that's so perfect for our podcast. I was like, oh my God. Since our podcast is supposed to be a soccer podcast, it's not really about soccer. In this case, yeah, you're totally right, Chiva. Like, it's so much that where it's like, we've said so much, but like, this is such a commentary on this world that you don't even need to see the game to know like this is rooted in what it is. And it is really cool to see. But the music video itself, so peak, that period in terms of what it is and where it comes from. And I believe that in my research too, I think Gael Garcia Bernal got a lot of money as like a ringtone from this, like over time in Mexico, like as a thing that people love because they love the movie so much that like it became a very popular ringtone because of him and his fame and being an it guy in the culture. That I found that to be kind of amusing as well. And they comment on that in the commentary multiple times, amongst many other things like. When we moved in the apartment, it was near a highway, but they hadn't built the second level of the highway yet in Mexico City.
Bro, this is
Yeah.
like literally I know where I was. I'm watching Otro Rollo. Like this is a show that was at Saturday Night Live at the time for that, but like this charted. Like I remember hearing this on the radio, watching music video shows, and this was on there, and it was absolutely huge. Everybody was doing it, and when I'd get home, and play with the people on the street, that'd be the celebration. Yo te vi, yo te vi, yo te vi llorando. Like honestly, just a cultural shock at that point because that's exactly what it was. From then pan over to the world's largest small screen TV in the living room where this is being played, where he's just rascando los huevos, just scratching everything in the area, and watching himself, enjoying himself. Like that is exactly what that moment was in time, and like it was going to be a hit. Like that song is huge, and again, the moment was crazy. The bad part is that nobody ever saw it in the States. So I was already going to school in the US, and there was nobody to talk to about this movie. And I was like, oh, I saw this cool fucking awesome movie. Like you talk to somebody about it, like, oh my God, really cool. No one, like nobody to ever talk to about this awesome movie ever.
That is the hope of the show.
It was just Drew.
Let's educate people.
It was just Drew and then me at that point.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting too about like at this point in the movie is that I feel like part of like, I'm curious, Drew, if you feel like this is, if we're talking about like the ascent of Cursi, maybe like the very peak of the movie, it's like then through this he meets Maya, and it's almost like this is all of his dreams, and everybody's getting what they wanted at this point. Do you feel like this is like the?
Oh yeah.
Would you say this would be the peak, and then after this is when everything begins to go downhill? After being
not the climax
dream girl,
of the story,
that's absolute peak.
Right? If you're drawing a story circle or a story,
not the climax, but maybe like
correct. This is where the ascent of their career. Yeah. He's gotten the house. He's gotten the woman that he used to watch on TV as the weather girl or I think.
She was I think she would just sound like random products.
Random products, but she did everything. She was just kind of like the TV it girl. Right? I was gonna say she also did like the lottery or whatever too. But like she was kind of like that girl you read about in magazine, like Maxim magazine. You're like, but you date her, right, in real life. And he tries to meet her, right? She's coming out of a restaurant, and the first time he meets her is like, oh hey, hi, cool, great, this is fantastic. And the meta commentary as well. Gael Garcia Bernal says that I think he met Dustin Hoffman, I think, or Al Pacino at some point like this, where they said, hi, sorry, and like barely looked at him and walked away. So that's like kind of what inspired this. But like he meets her, she doesn't even look at him. She says hi to their agent. And then eventually they're at the horse races, right? Where Beto's obviously doing his Beto thing, losing money on horses. And he's sitting there in a box trying to get the number of the waitress, and saying, oh, hi, hey, if you want to hang out later, great. And then she comes out of nowhere and says, now that you've made this music video, now that you're on the up and up, now that you're getting called up to L3, all this stuff's happening for you. Now let's start dating, and I'll attach myself to your star, and we'll see how far that goes. But you're totally right. I think this is definitely the peak of everything's going right for him. Everything feels good. And we know this isn't going to last just based on the tone of the movie, right? We know that the next swift thing's coming. Chiva, in your sense, where did you feel like at this point the movie was going to go from here?
It felt like it was too good to be true in a way, right? For the brothers, like everything's kind of going good. You see Beto wins money on the horse racing, so he has system going. Cursi gets the girl of like that they've all like just drooled over at the TV watching the commercials, right? So it's kind of like, okay, they're at a high right now in their career, and then they go back and they visit home. And it's like they're these famous people now. They're pro soccer players. They're the big shots of the small town where they're from. And it almost feels like, okay, something has to happen. This is too good to be true. Like, who messes up? Like, it happens everywhere. Like, who messes up? Like, who like does something that just ruins their career? And then you see that as it progresses.
And it's all for the right
that's Oh, go ahead, Tony. Yeah, and it's for their mom, right? That's the next scene we get is like everything's going right, and then we cut back to the village. They go home, right? And it's like, oh, at this point in other movies, they might like not go back and visit their family, but in the true thing of the culture, right? You give it back to the people, right, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, it's again one of those moments where like, no, that actually happens. The return into the ranch and being heralded as this person isn't exclusive to professional soccer players. My family lived this because we were the family that was fortunate enough to live in El Otro Lado on this side of the border.
Yep.
So when we had friends and pals that live by the fat of the land, not even that, you go back, and before you go back for a weekend in a ranch with your family and friends, you call them and say, hey, do you want anything from El Otro Lado? Do you want anything from the United States? Because higher quality, like, oh, give me a licuadora, give me some toilet paper, give me some clothes, because it's cheaper and better quality over there. And literally, we're talking about off the grid places. Like that place does not have electricity. I'll tell you that much. They have an outhouse. And that's, again, very apt for what this movie is supposed to be representative. And again, next scene is, again, it hits home with like, you live in a ranch, you live wherever. What do we all do? We're professional soccer players. We just go under 4 sticks at the beach, underneath some shade, and just hang out like with a family. Like that's a family picnic out, and like that's again where the groundness is and where the heart still remains, where even through however they're going to go ahead and go through and literally through people in later much more close scene coming up. But it's again a beautiful representation of those parallels. You really don't see the separation from Rudo y Cursi going in these separate ways. They're just going the same way that they're supposed to go, but it's a matter of who's is going to kind of like go a certain direction, and that's where you're talking about.
When I started kind of guessing, like, okay, Cursi's kind of taking this downhill. It's like when he's buying Maya a car, like a brand new car that she can't afford. He's like, I got you, babe. Like, pick whatever car you want. It's on me.
Was the shit, man. That was
so to me, it's like, okay, like you can tell she's a gold digger. She's taking advantage of you, and we all see it. But he's in love. He can't see it. So that's where I'm like,
but he also said, I'm gonna build mom a house on the beach, and then Beto back is like, no, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be the one to do it, right? Yeah. Sorry, Cesar, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna make a just very bad joke. I would just say, would you say she's a goal digger?
No, that was an excellent joke, and that is one that I'm glad you didn't.
Okay,
thank you for that.
Okay. Well, with an unprecedented thing in our very new podcast, with that joke, Cesar, I'm going to let us go to a break, and we will return after this message from our sponsors.
Monday, October 21st. Go, run, don't walk to SanDiego.Futbol/Cantina. The cantina is open, and it's time to pre-order your SanDiego.Futbol merchandise. Simply go to the website, scroll down, check out what's available, and then check out with your pre-orders. T-shirts coming fast. The T-shirts will be soft, they will be good, and they will get to you by the end of the year. Please pre-order now.
And welcome back. Thank you again to our sponsors for Club Deportivo Movie Club. We love you, and hopefully more returns for all those invested, including our community. Thank you for those of us watching this and investing in us as people. We love you, and we love to cover movies with you. So just let us know what you're thinking. Please give us feedback in the comments here on this episode via social media at SanDiego.Futbol. However you want to find us, Cesar H. Football Drew Stork, I mostly just do breadstick shit now on various social media platforms, but you can still DM me or
I
comment.
don't tweet that much anymore. You can reach out to us. Drew's doing breadsticks. I'm not checking my Twitter.
Yeah, who cares? However you want to do it, but SanDiego.Futbol is always there for your not only this, but anything else you want to know about news that's happening, especially the two guys here are joining us who work tirelessly to provide you that content and love you and love this community, and that's why they do it. So we were talking about Rudo y Cursi. Cesar made an amazing joke that we all thought was super tasteful and hilarious. And these brothers are really at the apex of their story. They are reaching the pinnacle of culture. Cursi has gotten a call up to El Tri. I mean, I don't know if there's anything more than becoming a saint in Mexican culture that is really achieving a higher status at that point. Pretty incredible. But we see the underpinnings of in Cursi's case, a woman taking his heart and his money, and in Beto's case, just people taking his money as he's gotten led into a very exclusive backroom casino somewhere in Mexico City by a weird gringo-ish, dude who's just kind of like obviously in with people, taking people's money. And it seems to be one of those things where at a certain point we watch Beto win, but ultimately we know that he's going to push the chips to the middle at a time that is not good for him. And we watch him lose more than he has. And we know that probably the cost of this will be some sort of fallout with his brother. How did that scene find you guys, just generally? Anybody jump in?
Man, I'm sorry, but this scene just hits me. No, like I love playing poker.
Yeah.
I mean, he had pocket queens set on the flop, and then there's 2 queens on the board, and then the guy rivers an 8 of heart, and that traps Rudo into it. That was just a situation where he was gonna lose all his money and more. He gets trapped with the check on after the river and goes all in.
Right.
Guy calls and says, "Well, I have a flush. River to flush." Pain.
You see it coming a mile away in the
you
movie, but in real life, you almost never do. You feel like I've got trip queens or trip anything in a high card. There, you're almost always going to bet on yourself, and especially when you're somebody like Rudo with his Eiffel Tower, betting system. You can see that he's just amped up.
And with his right hand, by the way, which is interesting. Like when he's like being carried by a truck, it's on the right hand side. Tells him to shoot on the right. It's just interesting.
Always the commentary to the right, right? And unlike our political movement here on this podcast, the movie definitely moves to the right consistently throughout the story in terms of the idea of where they're going, where we lead up to, and Cesar, you're totally right. Right? In this case, I think that's one of the sub commentaries in the film that just constantly. That's what I really appreciate as somebody who came up not just through narrative filmmaking, but poetic filmmaking. Poetic filmmaking is a thing where there is no story. They just give you a series of things and they let you figure it out. One of those things is subtle sometimes, is just like people doing things with the left hand or the right hand, or everything moves to a certain side of the frame, even. Like that's just part of the story. So I think here Carlos Cuarón and his brother are just both expert filmmakers in some ways of how to tell a story. And I think that's one of the weird subtexts that just consistently plays itself out. That's, if we're going to do something, it's to this side, right? If we're going to do this, it's to this side, right? As opposed to, sometimes you just have a choice. Sometimes it's random, especially in lesser films. But I think this film being in our pantheon of probably going to be on our Mount Rushmore, maybe when we're done with this show, hopefully, one of the things that they did very well is just little subtext that just really lace together what otherwise to people maybe not paying attention they wouldn't see. But I really appreciate things like that are just done really well done and just here and there. So
it lends itself to some deeper themes later in the movie too, which I'll bring up. Don't worry.
Okay.
I'll definitely bring up some more of the.
So we end up back at the house and it's empty. Beto's standing there. Cursi comes in and there's no furniture. It's empty. Oh no, we've been robbed, he says. But why is your dad's painting still hanging above the fireplace, right? That Beto's dad painted. Oh, well, that's because he figures it out very quickly. They have not been robbed, but the furniture was sold to cover gambling debts. He knows his brother. He knows what happened. And we have a nice brotherly squall on the floor. Chiva, Tony, have you guys ever fought like this physically?
Yes, Tony beats me up all the time. And it's not even
No,
funny.
it's
I'm waiting for myself.
Who owes money? What's? I didn't realize there was gambling losses between the two.
no.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Nothing like that. Nothing that bad.
it's just. I mean, again, I don't get physical much, but when I do, it's in good spirit. We don't hurt each other. Let's have that disclaimer, and never on the clock. But in
It's
any
always
case,
silly, mostly with you guys. I've seen it a couple times where you guys silly, like almost like pro wrestling, go at each other to, mess with each other. But it's,
sometimes you just need that. You just need that, and I think that's what this was. It was very cathartic for
oh yeah,
both brothers who are coming into a moment that
Well, this is betrayal.
it is betrayal, but
It is betrayal.
it's
Yeah,
something
100%.
that was.
But they're not
was
going to write
going-
each other out of their lives, right? They're not going to cut each other's face or like injure each other
Exactly.
in a way that's meaningful.
And just to touch on what you were saying, Drew, with just like the making of this movie, right? Like it really reminded me of, no, Mexicans know how to make movies. Mexicans know how to entertain. That scene is set as if it was a theater production. And
Yep.
Mexican theater is so cool. It's so rich. It's so different. Like it's I can't really explain. It's again another podcast. We'll dive into whatever that is, but again, it's just a reminder of like this is these are people who have been doing this for forever, right? And just like the golden age of cinema for Mexico is there, and these moments of heft really come across where you feel that moment of the rug is underneath Rudo and there's nothing there. Like next scene is him literally in the darkness coming to face and pay the Pied Piper literally. But it's, just again, I think a very interesting look at a reality of Mexican people as well. We all have an uncle, maybe that has a crux of some sort. Maybe he drinks a little too much. Just like that's a story that again goes back to what Mexican people see on a day in day out basis in Mexico, right? Like specifically, very specific to the country of Mexico, where these things just happen, and it's unfortunate. I've seen it with my mom and her tios and her brothers and stepbrothers. Like it happens. It happens. So again, well done, guys.
it's at a point where things are clearly beginning to unravel. Because I think another thing that we need to like keep in mind here is that this is also right after Cursi played at basically like some sort of like circus that had a small crowd, and like nobody was really digging it, right? Like nobody was having a good time there. And then what that then leads to is then him leading to like maybe he senses that things aren't exactly the way he wants it to be, but he proposes to his girlfriend. And I actually, like, I'm curious, like, what you guys think. Like, is that is that how either of you guys would propose to your partner, like
No.
with that little heart box?
I think that's how Drew did it, right?
100%.
Maybe,
I still get
but
shit
yeah.
for like not doing it soon enough and like taking my time to do it right. So maybe she would have preferred it just randomly after watching TV and my ego was small. I guess I don't know. But yes, most of us would like, and she did enjoy having a plan of some sort, right, to do this, and that's really what it's
Yeah.
about. Versus this felt very haphazard, kind of like, oh, this is what's going on, and I don't know, Tony, not going to push you in any corners.
I
But
bought this on the way back home. That's what it
Yeah.
felt like.
both of you guys, I think, are in relationships at this point. That's like, would you do that? Would you, have the balls do it that way, or would you want to make it to where they're family and things are around? And obviously, in this case, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, no, just but behind the scenes, people are gonna find out when it happens. It's like, yeah, no, this happened like 3 weeks ago. By the way, and like, oh, okay, it's a very you move. Like,
Yeah, I feel like you would do this.
yeah, no,
You
100%.
would. I
No,
would not.
This is
I
the
would.
Tony
You're not-
move. Okay.
Okay.
I feel like I
I'll-
respect my partner enough to like make it a bigger deal.
But it depends on the woman. It really does. But Maya Vega, like knowing what she's about, she probably won't want the flowers, the like rooftop full of, musicians or whatever. Like knowing the way these characters, she wanted a Hummer for nothing. Yeah, I don't know.
It feels symbolic of things not exactly of things not exactly being good or about to fall apart, because it's one thing to be like, here's a car, and then you would think like, oh, what's an engagement ring then going to look like after that? It's like, actually, it's this thing that I could have bought some little tiendita like on the way back
right.
home, and yes, there's a nice ring inside, but I got this small little box in here, like, so I think that it's kind of like, I guess, yeah, symbolic of just things probably not going well for them.
And
going
you
forward.
see,
And
the two sides of things where obviously Cursi was robbed, but he's still in a fully furnished bedroom. He has enough money to get a ring.
Yeah.
Next scene cuts to Rudo with his family asking with a pet monkey, by the way, which
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
this monkey is absolutely stellar in this film.
Underrated
Uh,
The
great
real
work.
victim. We never know what happens to this monkey, by the way.
Yeah,
He just
no.
disappears.
Yeah, that's true. We never get any.
We never
There's
know.
no closure.
Yeah.
Like we put them.
It's when you're in gambling debt like that, right? Like you see Rudo just being worried on the phone, just meeting with the guy and saying, "Hey, like you better pay up, or like they're going to come after you."
And it's the worst guy to have to owe money to. It's the guy that, again, in Mexican culture, es el vato fresa. No, o sea, no te puedo hacer nada ahorita. O sea, no hay nada que pueda hacer. There's nothing I can do right now. There's my dad asking for the money back, and ya te di esto. Espérate.
That scene in the grocery store is so it could have been Breaking Bad, Tony, to your point. Like, it really is like just spine-tinglingly scary how normal it is for this guy to just be like, no, they're gonna fucking kill you, man. But like, nothing I can do. I'm just here to help you as a friend. Like, I'm just buying diaper, and my wife is mad at me about the diapers. I'm, not having the brand she likes or whatever, like, which I can relate to at the moment. But like, yeah, it really is like one of those things where, like, luckily I'm not asking people for gambling debts to pay up. I'm just dealing with the diapers, man. But like, it is just like really chilling, like how normal it is for this guy to just be like, oh yeah, and then you see a security blocking off the ends of the aisles, right? And unfortunately, in that space, like this is a guy you just don't fuck with, right? Like, you don't cross this guy because you're gonna end up where we end up at the end of the movie. Not to spoil anything, but like, people, they'll take their pound of flesh if they can't find a pound of money to take from you, and that's ultimately how it's been since the beginning of time in these situations. And we do go to the sister's wedding where their beautiful sister gets married off to a drug king, who, another subtext in the movie, culturally, of like, hey,
Also, Sonora Dinamita.
That doesn't happen too often
Also,
in
Sonora
Mexican
Dinamita.
families, but it does happen to some. It does happen to some families where they're like, oh, like, yeah, she met someone and they're tied with the narcos and this and that, and she's well off now.
It's very Game of Thrones-esque that happens
It
down there.
happens.
Like, yeah,
right.
sold
Yeah.
off, and
Yeah.
and look, you guys are rich now. I'm going to buy you a house. And again, Pachangon, the party, excellent. Like,
Yeah,
that's
that
exactly
wedding
what
looked
happened.
fun.
That's exactly how it goes down. Like, the attire, like, wardrobe wasn't even a factor. They just asked, hey, you guys bring your Sunday's best, and everybody already had that. So
bring your wedding outfits. Yeah, bring what you'd wear. Yeah, anyway.
And then that sense of urgency now just starts to build, right? Like, you see it through the next couple scenes where you see Rudo getting the phone calls at late nights and having to have the cell phone in the back end, and just how every parallel isn't necessarily going upwards. Now these parallels are just going straight down, and it's in their own ways. One a little bit more serious than the other, I would say, but I think just the way that it was very much handled in terms of using pop culture at the time and the tabloids and all that. Yeah.
No, it's like you find a new conflict, right? Where it kind of switches the scene where, yes, Rudo still has this debt that he has to pay, but professionally on the game, he's killing it. He has the record for most clean sheets in the history of the Mexican league. And then for Cursi, he's on a drought. He's not scoring any goals. You got fans telling him, you better freaking score or we're going to have to beat the shit out of you, dude. Like, that's just how it goes. So it kind of, you get that switch of like, oh, wow, like now Rudo's on the come up. He might get a call up for the 3 and all that, and then Cursi is just going downhill.
I quickly want to get a
That's-
nod from
that-
you, Cesar, whether or not you approved of the coverage of the sport, seeing as it was your profession. Rudo was asked when he came off the bus by a guy with a recorder and a vest and said, "Hey, like clean sheet record. Like, what do you think about this? Are you happy with that interpretation as opposed to goals?"
Yeah, I would say so. Although what it would be a better representation of Mexican soccer media is at least like 50 journalists like sleeping next to the entrance to the training like headquarters or an airport, and getting to ask the questions right there. But I would what I do want to bring up is another like it's funny because a little bit of a tangent. When we were on your guys' pod, I was thinking about we were talking. It was like, oh, it'd be fun to be like bring out like be like, you know what, I'm gonna bring a yellow card here, or I'm gonna bring a red card here for this point in the movie. I can't really think of any for this movie. And if we could somehow have the opposite of a yellow card, if we're talking about like favorite scenes, it was when Cursi is being approached by the fans, the supporters. Remember, we were just talking about them being like, hey, like you better do this, you better do that. I know where you, or I think it, like the line was like, I know where you live, I know what your car looks like. And then after that, and I think it's really indicative of fandom, not just
Right.
soccer culture, but just fandom in general.
Yeah.
This fan, like indicative, maybe someone on Twitter being like, I hate you, and they're like, by the way, can I get an autograph? And then he signs the autograph, gives it back to the fan. But
It was so
there's a lot
real.
about the hostility
Oh my
that,
God.
and also the fickleness of fans. We're just like, I hate you, you're the worst, I know where you live, I'm gonna hurt you. Like, by the way, can I have an autograph ahead of this big game?
Yeah, right outside the hotel,
I absolutely
right?
love
Like,
that scene.
I also know where you're sleeping tonight, right? Like, that's the thing is, the
Yeah.
collision course of this film, starting with the two brothers on a dirt field, eventually ending up them both up in the first division, leads to a game where at the wedding we find out they're going to be playing each other in a couple weeks, and that's going to put in question that is the record for Beto Rudo to get the record, and for Tato Cursi to work his way out of the slump. And the team still believes in him at that point, his team. And we get to the hotel and we're met with these fans. We're met with the scene where he gets out of the agent's car and is told, hey, it's going to be okay, man. You just got to score. You just got to do your job. Just lock everything out. No distractions. That's what we're told. Fans show up and say, okay, here's distraction number 1. They go into the hotel. Distraction number 2 is he picks up the cell phone as soon as he's done talking to the fans. Maya, where are you? I proposed to you. I gave you a ring. I haven't literally heard from you. Calling her at the wedding, calling her from the hotel. He's there in his hotel room watching entertainment news. She's engaged. She's now with a new guy, right? The new hot shit in Liga MX, another player. And he loses it. He just has like a mental psychotic break where he runs around, tries to punch people, tries to fight things, breaks things, and is eventually subdued by his teammates and given a sedative by the team doctor to where we see, oh shit, this guy has lost it. Like Maya ruined him in this way. Like he's just gone at this point. Can you guys relate in that way?
I mean,
Losing your shit over a girl? I don't know.
I don't think any of us have ever been there, right?
No, what's great,
but at the worst possible time, right?
Yeah, on top of all that, he also
Yeah.
gets told, hey, like, if you don't score in this game, you're going to get sent out down to second division.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
That's
Yes.
almost a hill that you probably won't be able to climb back up. Like, you get sent down. He's already they started the pro journey at a later age than you want to.
Yeah.
So you get sent back down, and we've seen players still playing there that are pro players now that they just never got back to first division.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, I mentioned earlier that the gulf between the first division and second division Mexican soccer, like it's not like, oh, you're going down to, if it was England, like going down to the championship, but there's a possibility they go back up. I mean, it's the same thing with American soccer. It's not often that you would have someone be like, oh, where they go down to the USL championship and then they don't exactly like bounce back really quickly. They're often overlooked, unfortunately, actually a little overlooked for a number of different reasons, but yeah, so that's by saying that they're going down the second, he would be playing the second division. That's quite serious, especially for someone who was, if I remember correctly in the movie, he had the award for like Rookie of the Year and possibly like Player of the Year. So that's a serious deal for him.
I think the biggest point where I think they got right and they probably spent the most budget on was the atmosphere of the game itself outside leading into the stadium, right? So you have that setting of the supporter groups from both teams marching in and chanting in a seemingly incredibly genuine way, right? Like you just got a bunch of actual supporters and said, hey, this is a song for the movie, learn it. And boom, they picked it up incredibly quick, having custom chants for each of the fictional characters and sound incredibly real. Panning over to the newspaper stand where people stand and listen to the game. Like these are things that are still happening to this day. You think of all this great technology, but no, you still have the taquero, the little señor with a little black and white TV as he's chopping up your various meats into a homogeneous taco that is the best taco you've ever had, leading into this big, huge atmospheric game that, again, it's just so common in a lot of ways to the Mexican community. Like this isn't anything special. And again, to think about what we have now, what we see now, like what teams are striving for is what this movie was able to capture very well. Like they did it.
And there was a lot on the line on this game, right? Where Rudo ends up settling the game. Like they'd say, hey, like lose the game and your debts are clear because people have money on this, right? Like the agent has money on this of them losing this game. So he has to pretty much sell this game, get scored on, lose his record, and then the brother on the other side needs to score and win the game to stay as a professional. So they both have a lot to lose and a lot to gain.
You have to betray.
That was the most heart-sinking moment. Oh, I was
Yeah.
gonna say for me was him sitting in the bathroom and just taking that phone call of, yeah, let's do it. Let's sink the game. Let's take a fall in a prize fight kind of moment where it's just like you hear about it boxing, it felt like that kind of moment, but for soccer in a way there's few players that can influence a game holistically in a game that's played with 11 players versus 11 players. And one of those players is a goalkeeper, right? If a goalkeeper takes a dive in a game, there's almost no coming back. You will take 2 to 3 shots per game, no matter if your team's playing the worst team ever, like Tottenham or whatever. But like you will take those shots, in that game. So I do think that that's the case. Is like it just felt like, oh, what's going to happen. You can feel it. So either way, he's either going to die, or it's going to be one of those things where something will go wrong and he'll not be able to make good on his bets. So either way, this is going to end horribly for one of these guys, right? We just don't know which one at this point.
Yeah, and I will say, I feel like the pain was very different for both of them, right? For Rudo, it's like the pain is, man, I messed up with all this gambling. Now I got to lose my record because he loves the game, genuinely loves and has a passion for the game. And now he has to lose a record that probably wants to keep and like say, I was the best goalkeeper in Mexican league history. Whereas for Cursi, he wants to stay as a professional because he loves the fame, the fancy lifestyle, being rich and having the best girl, in his mind is like, I have to be the best again to get Maya back. So like, that's the reason why it's painful for him. He wants to be able to stay in that fame, in that life. And so the pain levels are just different for the different reasons, but it's still painful nonetheless.
Talking about that Walter White, like, don't do it, Walt. Don't do that. Like, please, like, I like you've done this terrible thing. And that's the thing that gets me is like, after all, even through it, like the thing that hurts him the most after he was hurt, he hurt people. The most remorse that Rudo has is betraying the game.
Yeah.
And that is just something like I felt, again, talking about that moment of like, for me, like, am I going to continue to do this my whole life? Like, am I going to continue to try to be a pro soccer? Like, I kind of lost faith with that. Like, I didn't do it for the right reasons. Talking about players that we think of and like, oh, they're not in it for the right reasons. Like, I think of Mesut Ozil. Like, he was just punch in, punch out. Like that. This was a job for him.
Carlos Vela,
I can't. I don't understand that. For me, that's fundamentally wrong to play this game that way. And just to have that over the head of Rudo, not just on the field, but off the field. Like, there's consequences everywhere. There's not a right choice, but you just see him sell the game. I'm just like, don't do it. Just don't do it.
I
Please
do want to
don't do it.
say, like, this movie hits the spot everywhere. The one part that I was like very kind of like let down, but it's funny and it worked, is when they're in a pro game, right? The game of the season, and Rudo's telling the kid, "Hey, go tell my brother on the bench that this, and this." And it's like, no pro player is really going to do that. But it's funny.
Yeah. I guess that's I actually thought about that too, and I wonder if that was if the filmmakers knew that it would benefit the movie, because, like, for example, the back and forth that did lead to like a funny moment where like he basically like accidentally makes a joke against his mom just because he gave too long of a message to the kid, and he kind of was like, it's too long, so he just kind of like summarized it in the worst way possible. So I kind of get that, but yeah, there'd be no, if that happened in a Liga MX game, people would be like, wait, what's this kid doing? Why is this kid going back and forth between the goalkeeper and the opposing team? But yeah, that did definitely
causes a
stick out
goal.
to me.
Why did two players assault a child when they gave him a kick? Like, hey, get out of here! Like that.
I know,
Villainized for
Right.
this.
The whole like sending messages with the kid thing was like so hilarious, but like shows the depravity of the moment where they're just like, I don't care anymore.
Yes.
I'm
Also,
done
I don't
with
know if
this.
I'm the only one that
Right.
noticed this, but the timer for the game was going down instead of up.
Yeah.
It started at
Interesting.
Oh,
I
really?
didn't know if that was like a
Oh,
And even
wow,
back in the
good
day,
catch.
like it was first half, primer tiempo, 1 to 45, and then segundo, like 2T, segundo tiempo, 1 to 45 again.
Yeah, no, there was a large period where I didn't understand what 47th minute, 90th minute. No, it's 43rd minute of the second half. What are you
Yeah.
talking about?
No, but for this one, the time was going down, and that kind of ticked me off a little. I was like, you're doing so good.
This
yeah,
is the
very
most
strange. Not sure why.
Right.
Like
Very
the
odd.
movie becomes a movie in the biggest soccer time and place, right? Like, yeah, sure, we're communicating through children. All right. Oh, the game here, there's a secret cell phone on. All right, that's fine. Like, let's go. Timer going down. Like, it's okay. But again, the atmosphere that was created just it doesn't matter. We made it here. We just want to find out what happens.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, sorry, I was gone for like a minute or so because I don't know if it was my internet or my headphones. Hopefully it's my headphones, not my internet, and I'll be able to still talk for the rest of the episode. But if I remember correctly, I think that was filmed at the old version of the Lucas Stadium. I like looked it up and I was like, that kind of looks like the Lucas Stadium. And if I remember correctly, I did some like quick Googling. But I believe that was filmed there, which is appropriate actually, because obviously in Liga MX, there's some stadiums that don't exactly have the best atmosphere anymore, but the Luca is one of those teams that still week in, week out has a fantastic atmosphere back in the day, and even now after they've, well, it helps to have a remodeled stadium, but I felt like that was kind of appropriate as well. And they could have, I mean, yes, maybe they could have done the Estadio Azteca, but I imagine it's not easy to run out the Estadio Azteca.
It still felt like a cage fight, which I think is what you wanted for this, right? Like it felt like a cage fight.
Yeah, it made it
and
feel
that's
more intimate. Yeah, more
right.
intimate and close. Yeah,
like a
yeah.
Torero Stadium in San Diego, where like you're just on top of it, right? You're right there, and like the players can hear what you're saying from the supporter end, right?
Yeah.
And like that's what mattered here was I'm gonna fucking kill you, Cursi, if you don't fucking do this. Like same thing with Beto when he's blowing the saves, then like the supporters know it. They're just like, this guy's gonna fucking sink us if we don't win this. And so there is a little bit of back and forth. First half goes down. Nothing really happens except Beto trying to take a fall in a couple of situations where he eventually works his way out. Score's still there. And then Cursi gets on in the second half, right? They need answers on the Amaranto side, Deportivo Amaranto, which he plays for. Let's get him on and see what happens. And the collision course is set for what I think in our hearts knew was going to happen. Chiva, did you know what was coming? Did you feel like, okay, they're going to give us a nice bookend here? Or what did you feel at that moment when Cursi comes on?
Yeah, it was I mean, I like to be surprised by movies, and I don't like to predict. Like my girlfriend always likes to predict movies, like this is going to happen. This guy's
going to die or whatever. Yeah.
And in my mind, I was like, no, Cursi's going to score a goal, and then like everything's going to be okay. Like they're going to retire, like whatever. They're going to go to a World Cup. I don't know, but like I was like, this is going to be a great ending.
Did we get that great ending?
I mean, in
a way, it was, and you get that.
This is
false.
You get that goal, and then it's offside.
Yeah, we call that
yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
You feel okay for a moment. Everything's resolved. Yeah.
And you're the goalkeeper. You're like, Rudo, what are you doing? Like, how did they score that on you? You don't actually see the shot, but like a lot of the soccer scenes in this movie, but you're like, oh, Rudo, you could have stopped that.
But as much as they did right, like here you see the goal, you celebration, and you see everything around it. You felt that offsides. You didn't see the action, but you felt that offside. You thought he scored. There's elation. The Nopaleros, oh no, like no, but that switch, that turn, and everything is great at this point. Everybody's happy, but then you get that turn immediately of nope, it's an offsides, and that's how offsides are. They gut you from the inside out, and then you get the reactions of all the fans too who are watching. You get people in La Tiendita in the little store just
you get the reaction of the new boyfriend, like offside.
Yeah.
Like that's so messed up.
And it kind of like it hits you in the gut a little bit because it like then foreshadows. You're like, oh, maybe this isn't going to work out for all involved. Maybe this isn't going to play out the way want it to. This isn't going to be the great, beautiful, like Disney-esque like finish that goal had. Like you're like, okay, well,
This is
things are about to get interesting.
It's definitely going to be fucked up in the end. Like that's how I felt. Like
knowing
the filmmaker the first time even going in, I was like, they're going to twist the knife because that's what these guys do, and they love to write that way.
Yeah,
which is I'm going to take something you love and then make you rue yourself for loving it. And the agent doubles down on his bet that's going to bail Beto out at halftime, and we just see it starting to backslide from there, and we know, okay, here's where it's going, and we end up with a final penalty in the closing minutes of the game, and they face up, and there's a back and forth as you'd expect between brothers on a real game. Hey, they're going to face up. They're going to get in his face, especially in Liga MX where there's less decorum and there's the officials might not be on that as quickly. You have a little dust up, and in that they're looking to fight, but in reality is saying, hey man, for both of us, go this way.
And it's
okay.
It's like Cursi takes the ball away from the player that the coach chose to shoot the penalty. And it's like, no, give me that. Come on. And it's like, I mean, we've seen stuff like that happen in real life too, where players defy the coaches, and it's not a happy ending, right? But this is like the perfect, like, oh my God, it's how they got here with the penalty kick. And then you get Rudo to tell him, shoot it to the right.
Yeah, and that psychological breakdown of that, right? Like, from an outsider, this is just
my right or your right? Because last time,
yeah, we're not even
there.
The psychological aspect as an outsider who you're seeing this, and they have that great shot as if you're watching it from as a game. Goalkeeper comes up to the shot taker and starts talking shit, but it's layered because they're brothers. What could they possibly be saying to each other? And in that moment, it's just the most beautiful thing where I am older brother. You don't know what I'm facing right now, but I can't tell you. I need you to take care of this for me. I need you to listen that I really care and love about you. But at the end of the day, just fucking shoot it to the right. Like, just shoot it.
Do what you did last time. We've done this before.
Yeah.
We've been here. And last time I was mad, but this time just do it again. Do it the right way.
Yep. Like, just do one thing right for me, please. The one thing I asked, like, at the end of it, just go ahead. And again, that just moment of tension, the fans screaming, everybody has skin in the game, just that silence of like, all right, something's going to happen here. Something is going to happen. It's going to work out for one of them. Somebody's going to be happy. Somebody's going to be sad. Is it really going to get there? And I mean, take it home. I don't know who wants to take that. Like, it's
the kick comes. We know what the kick is going to be. It comes off, but like, we don't know what's going to happen. And he dives to his right. But though, again, same way as before.
Right.
And you can see, and this is early CG as well. Some of the ball
the soccer ball does look a little funny.
But,
still.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you can see his eyes move to his body as the ball comes, and he thinks the ball's going the other way, or even, hey, maybe I can even avoid it. I'm not even going to use my hands, and the ball comes right at his hip in a way that you can't move your hip. Like when you're diving, you can't thrust your hips almost. Tony, I don't know if you can. You're an expert, but at that point, you've given up. You've
I'll,
made a choice, and the
I'll
the
talk to
way
that.
that it is, the way that it strikes him is almost impermissible. You can't do anything about
Yeah.
it, but it bounces off him and up over the goal from his hip up over the goal, and that's heartbreaking in a way because you can read his eyes and see this is the end of my life, and simultaneously Cursi saying, I've also missed. This is the end of my life at this point. But how do you feel, Tony, as a goalkeeper watching that moment in
It,
terms of not wanting to save a penalty, but then doing it?
it's the
It's
there's not a
tragedy in the purest form.
there's not a lot of achievements that goalkeepers get ever recognized for. Now you have the
Right.
Golden Glove,
100%.
menos goleado. There's not a lot of things that you can hold on as a goalkeeper, but just having any sort of record to signify the greatness that you might have had for one season is still a record, and a clean sheet record is the highest thing you can have in a season. You're going to be a legend. You're going to have a statue. Your nickname is going to be there forever. Like the kids outside the game who are playing goalkeeper are going to say, "Oh, yo soy Rudo, yo soy Rudo." No, like you are a cemented legend. He gets that achievement, the thing that he wanted to, because he loves the game. He's a student of the game. He loves everything about it. But then, even then, that's when the game betrays him. He's so freaking good at being a goalkeeper. He can't help it. There's nothing
Right.
he can
Yeah.
physically do to not be as good at what he is as he is. And that's what led to him saving his season, saving his image, and just dooming himself in that moment, just knowing what this all means in that second. There's no do-overs. In the first penalty, what he did was he ran into the goal and said, nope, do it again. And then the agent was like, no, no más uno, that's it. It's finite. And that's the
Life.
brutality of penalties and the game and soccer in a lot of ways. I had seen or just read, I don't remember, about the two Escobars, that ESPN 30 for
Yes.
30, right?
Wonderful
Excellent.
story. Yeah. Well, I say wonderful. It's
Just
a
beautiful,
depressing
nice
story. A depressing story, but it is excellently told on the 30 for 30. Yeah.
It's incredible.
No, Drew, something I want to bring back is just you said they both looked at each other. You have that look in your face like, wow, my life is over. But for Rudo, is literally, my life is over. Like, these guys are going to kill me. For Cursi, is like, my life is over. I'm not going to be rich anymore. I'm going to go back to my poor
Right.
man's life.
Yeah. Yeah.
His dream of being
and not
anything
to-
besides a has-been is gone, and so any music, anything past that is the passion, right, from both of them is drained, as Tony said, like what they loved and what they put into. But yeah, Cesar, how'd you feel in this moment?
I'll say not to be Charlie Day in front of a bulletin board pointing at like left and right stuff. But I told my wife about it. I was like, it's this and this, and she's like, you're reading into this too much. You're dumb.
You're caring too much.
but it was interesting because, and actually, it's a slight, if you will, Drew. There's actually a slight edit to what you wrote for the rundown here for later. But so Rudo obviously says to the right, Cursi shoots to Rudo's right. Cursi uses his right leg. He points with his like right hand too, like after the incident, to be like, that's where I was going to shoot it. But the leg that it actually hits, if we're looking at a VAR like situation,
Yeah,
it's actually the left leg.
right.
And it's like kind of like in this movie where everything's like leaning to the right. Then this situation, that kind of like the thing that kind of like throws everything off is this left leg, and then it just
And
everything
it's a 1 in a million
collapses.
stop. It's almost luck, right? It's almost like, and Tony said,
Yeah.
like your body's doing what you know how to do from a skill standpoint, but you're almost it's destiny in a way of like the way the ball floats over and it doesn't ricochet off the top or in, like the bounce. I watched a ball hit both posts in Portland in 2015 in the 7th round of a shootout that went 11 rounds that I'll never forget. This is the best shootout I've ever seen. You can look it up. It's one of the best MLS games of all time. In a league that doesn't have many great games, this is maybe the best. Laws in shootouts of physics sometimes betray you, right? Like that's the thing. Just generally, I'm getting at is like in this case, it bouncing off him was unforeseeable in some ways, but also the culmination of this story in a way that you knew, okay, here's what's going to happen. And the descent quickly from this is very fast towards the end of the movie, and we can get to our ranking shortly. But they essentially go from there to, you can hear it on my mic. There's a people mover happening in the room I'm in. So sorry for that. But generally, what happens is we find out these characters end up in a situation where one of them does not get killed, but does get his pound of flesh taken from him in the form of Rudo in an alleyway in a taxi. Gets pulled up on some guys. They shoot him through the window of a taxi. In his leg needs to be amputated. He loses his leg, the very one by which lost the gambling debt. And Cursi kind of ends up okay in some ways, goes down to the Segunda Division. He washes out, but then ends up his brother-in-law, the drug lord, buys him a karaoke bar on the beach where he gets to sing once a night and entertain an audience. So not too bad for him. And they still love each other, and they're still brothers at the end, and they still want to sing a song on the beach together with the accordion. And I think like that's where this movie is a beautiful dark comedy that like kind of rounds out that way of, hey, we feel okay. Well, go ahead.
What broke my heart in this with this ending is like, growing up as a Mexican kid, I mean, just everyone tells their mom the same thing. I'm gonna buy you a house, or I'm gonna build you a house, or something.
Right.
And they had all, I mean, not all the money in the world, but they had the funds to be able to do it, and they never still got to do that for their mom.
The one thing.
Like the one thing
Yeah.
And someone else stepped into their place.
Build their mom a house by the beach, and they couldn't do it.
The brother-in-law did.
And what's painful in that situation too, in this story, that is a lot about family, right? And not just about being brothers, but also them wanting to build this house for their mom, which they bring up a couple times. It's like that house is eventually bought, but it wasn't by them. Like they had, like you said, they had the opportunity to do so, but they didn't pull it off, and someone else did. Not thanks to them. And that's what must be so crushing for them as well.
That's gonna haunt them for the rest of their life. It's like
it's dark, but it's the truth. It's where some of us end up is you get what you wanted, but you didn't get it the way you wanted. And I think that's the sad ending of this, but at the same time, the reality of it versus the film we watched, in our first one is like, yeah, his dad dies, but at the same time, everything kind of works out the way he wanted it to go, which is I get found, I get where I want to be. Here, they end up ultimately together. Ultimately, they did what they wanted to do, but they don't do it the way they ever wanted to do it. And they lose any sense of self in the game that they had, but they still have each other. And so we get the at least nice.
I think that's what matters in the end. Yeah.
Right. Is that family still matters and we're still there. But to Chiva's point, like you're not made whole in that emotional investment in the film of like you lost something along the way. You lost a little bit of yourself. You lost a little bit of what you invested emotionally into these characters. You're just never going to get back because they never got it back. They never were made whole. And so that's the game. That's how you play. That's, to Tony's professional achievements, Alejandro Guido, and the people who can endorse his goalkeeping record, did they achieve everything they wanted to? Maybe, but at the same time, I think for some of those people, winning a championship for San Diego, right, to the point of this podcast and the market we serve, that's something a lot of us have always wanted, and we've never reached that apex, right? And that's something that I think, poignantly, I'll try and button out my commentary on this and say, like, are we going to get there? But I just don't feel like this film delivers that emotionally, but it's a very true story in that way, a very true fake story, right? Obviously not real. Obviously everything's concocted, but that it felt so real in that way.
Yeah, what I will say is it felt extremely bittersweet, but I will say it did, after everything falling apart, within the last like hour of that movie. I will say it does end on a slightly positive note, because for me, I'm saying it's interesting because like I don't have a brother. I have a sister, but for me, like I don't know. I still think it's a movie about brothers, but using soccer as a vehicle to tell that story and to talk about family, and that yes, lots of fighting that we saw at the very beginning and throughout the movie, but they still sing because he's like, "Hey, sing that song that that I really like or that you're really good at." And it's like, "I want you to want me, like need you to need me." And it's about needing each other, like still at the
Right.
very end. So I thought that was still kind of a nice way to end it, where it's just like, yes, it is kind of a really sad, like call it a dark comedy too if you want, but like there is something there about the story about the brothers still needing each other at the very end, and I like that.
And you can tell right there with the haircut, right? I think it's very apparent with like the nickname Cursi, very flamboyant,
Yes.
and again having
Yeah.
highlights. He's keeping his hair and his looks and his vanity throughout the whole movie, and then at the end, that's like that signal of like, well, I'm not that anymore. I'm a different person.
Right.
I went through
Right.
this, and just the shaving of the head,
Right.
like that's a real thing, and that's again he lost his flair. He lost that, and he has his joy in his karaoke bar, and that's it. And his brother knows that he doesn't have a leg, but he also knows that like he did it. Like he is satisfied.
Mhm.
I know, I know Rudo would have done that every single time over again. And
I agree with that.
and like I think
Yeah.
again, like in my moment in time, like that was this again is a movie of like, yeah, no, this all fizzles out. Maybe I'm not gonna go into gambling and just lose a leg, but like that's yeah,
Hopefully
no,
not.
exactly, right? Like that's the reality of this and getting an education and staying in the States and taking the opportunities as a Mexican American. Cesar, you and I have had these conversations, right? Where like that
Oh yeah.
Mexican American title is very different perhaps to just either Mexican or American or combination of both, but it just serves that experience that I was fortunate enough to go through. And you talk about Guido, right? And I think about would I have liked to have played and explored the game of soccer the way I have, or the way that Guido did, and knowing that like his career is coming to an end, and he lived the dream, but in that dream there are hardships, there are sacrifices, there are injuries, there's pain, that's reality. That's something that I was willing to do, and I don't think so. And I think that this movie really helped me just kind of have that closure, to say, you know what, it's football is sí es vida, but you know what, it's not all. It really isn't. But it was a really transformative movie for me. Um, so I really like that you guys have gone here and allowed me to have this movie because, you know, if it's again knowing who that actress was because I'm a prepubescent teenager and know who that is in early internet to no, like I see my friends, I see people who I've met, who people who I didn't talk to. The reality after of driving to another dirt sand lot and seeing the next, hey, who's this person now? Comedically driving a red Bolchito, a red Volkswagen instead of the red Camaro, right? Like that's the reality of it. Where like that was just a microcosm of the soccer experience in Mexico. The next one is right there. Like
Yeah.
that's you'll find that a dime a dozen, and it's just very cyclical. But I like the movie.
Yeah, and that's how it ends. Is as you're saying, Batuto, the agent, shows back up at another dirt field, maybe the same dirt field, looking for another gem to pull out of the rough. He lost his Corvette. He's now in a Volkswagen Bug, all red because that's his style. And that's how we end is on a dirt field watching guys play to "I Want You to Want Me," and that's the story, right? It all goes round and round. People keep coming up. And I guess the one question I'll ask here to round us out before we go to ratings real quick, are these dynamic characters? And this is just a honestly rhetorical question. Are these dynamic characters? Did they grow or were they just the same guys the whole time and the story rotated around them? And I think that's the thing I watch this film and I constantly ask myself that we could do this whole podcast, a 10-part series on like this film and like what it means to culture, we've talked about in terms of politics, in terms of the league, the characters themselves. We didn't even get to Manguito, Beto's wife, who gets into a multi-level marketing scheme as a very like D plot in the movie. So like there's so much in this film that like if you haven't enjoyed it and you just watched our podcast, please watch this movie because it'll explain so much to you of culture, especially if you're a white person. Like you'll have a different appreciation for why people view this sport as part of life, and not just a extension of culture or whatever, but like something that really wraps up their entire emotion. If you let yourself into it and you really give yourself to it. But it is now time for ratings. So I will put us in there in terms of ratings for this film. We have both
Drew,
player
I think we're
ratings.
losing
I think you're cutting out right there.
Oh, sorry, I'm cutting out in and out here as I'm in a weird spot physically. As I said, geography is life and shapes our life. My geography has me with bad Wi-Fi at the moment recording this, so apologies if anybody has it in and out there. But one of the things I want to cut to is what is our rating for this film? As our film podcast rating is, what score would you give this film? And then we'll have a new rating system that we just invented for our second episode moving forward. But Cesar, I'll start with you. What score would you give this film? And we'll go quickly to Chiva and then Tony.
Yeah, I'm looking at it really quickly. I'd give this a entertaining 3-3. That you got a goal immediately early on in the movie, and it was just back and forth, entertaining soccer, zero complaints. Quite happy, and I felt like I learned a lot from this game. So I'd give it a highly entertaining 3-3. That was back and forth and high pressing and attack minded, and just it was really entertaining.
I gotta agree with you there. I mean, it's the first time I see this movie, and it won't be the last time for sure. I'm gonna probably get my girlfriend to watch it too, just because it's that good. I do give it a 3 out of 3 as well, just because. I mean, I to answer your question, Drew, like, I do think the characters grew in a way. But if you ask me, I'm pretty sure Rudo's still going to gamble even with one leg.
Right.
Right? Yeah, you get that sense, right? You get that sense.
Another one.
Yeah.
And then Cursi, I mean, he's still back to being a musician, which that's his true passion, right? So in a way, they grew. Like, I think they learned a lot of lessons, but they're still going to be the same people that they were the whole movie. But overall, it's a 3 out of 3 for me.
So we're doing 3 out of 3 or a score, Drew. So
I was saying 3-3.
Like,
I
what's
was
your
saying it was a
score?
3-3. Like,
Yeah,
scoreline.
like how many goals,
Like, it was a
and
good,
like how do you view the game? So in Cesar's mind, it's just a goal fest. You know, every 10 minutes, 15 minutes, there's a goal back and forth between two teams, and you can score it however you feel. Like, is it 6-0?
Yeah.
Like the goal just the movie achieves over anything that's coming against it, or is it, as Cesar's putting it, just an entertaining back and forth?
Got it.
Yes,
Okay, that
exactly.
makes more sense.
Yeah,
Like,
no, 100%. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
you're like a 3.
I was a little
here.
confused with it.
It's an emotional score, right?
I'm gonna go with a like 4-3 comeback win. Like, it's just,
I like that.
I think it gave me a at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that.
I think, again, I think a high scoring, high paced tie, 2-2, lightning pace back and forth. There was good possession for both teams. Everybody kind of shared the ball. There was great chances. There was excitement on both ends. It wasn't a mistake fest. It was just a very solid game that went to penalties, and whatever team I was on lost. And I felt like I lost. Like, I felt like just a sense of just, man, like, Rudo lost his leg, like, it was just the worst case scenario. The best case scenario of a brother missing or somebody stopping, nobody won in that situation. And so it just felt like a draining loss. But again, it's one of those things where you go back and you're just like, man, it had to happen that way because it was such a good game. I think of again, tying emotions together, Maxi Rodriguez against Mexico in the World Cup. It had to take that goal, that circumstance, to eliminate Mexico in that moment, and it tear your heart out. That's what this felt like. And I think, you know what? I'm changing my score again. Whatever, Mexico, Argentina 2006 World Cup.
2-1.
2-1. That's what it was.
I think it was 1-1, and then it was
1-1.
Extra time? Is that golazo?
Yep, extra time.
Is that golazo? Yeah.
There's a goal at the end to put the knife in the heart. I'm with
You're
Cesar.
making me think about that goal again. Making me relive that.
I'm with Cesar. It is a back and forth where it's a draw, though, to Tony's point, that feels like a loss. Like, it's something where, like, it was this game that you got wrapped up in, you feel everything, and in the end, a goal in the 94th minute shapes your view of whether this was a win or a loss, even though it's a draw, right? Like, even though, you know, like, oh, the worst we could do is draw this game once you get into the 90th minute, pretty much, still a loss. And so, like, that's, I think, the way to feel about this is 3-3, 4-4. 5-5 is an insane score line. So I'd say 3-3, 4-4, somewhere in there, where it's just so many goals scored back and forth. You're like, oh, they're scoring on this, they're scoring on that. So the other bit I'll bring us to is a new scoring metric that we have now on our podcast, which is player ratings. We also send our player ratings to our wonderful artist who has created our logo for both SanDiego.Futbol and Club Deportivo Movie Club. And this is what we'll wrap with is our idea of player rankings. So we ranked our 2 players here, and in the future we'll try and rank maybe one key player or a couple key players. In this case, we have 2 of the title players, so you got to rank them both. And we ranked Tato and Beto, and together our combined rankings were passing accuracy for Tato 83, shooting 81, passing 78, dribbling 87, defense 50. I think we're all in agreement that he'd play no defense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And then physically 68, kind of weak, maybe wasn't there. And altogether, that would give him about a overall player ranking of, what do we want to say here? I would say it's about a 78 to 82, somewhere in that range, based on.
I would say, yeah. I wonder what the actual math would be. But I think of him as a good level Liga MX player, which would probably put him, I would say, in the mid to high 70s.
Correct.
Is probably what I would say.
I think we're all in agreement. I see a lot of head nods. I think we're in there, 79, 80, maybe on a good day, depending on who's doing the rankings. And we will maybe make something out of these cards at some point. I don't know, but this is a fun new ranking that has been brought to our attention, and we like doing. Beto is a diving 88, handling 81, kicking 77, ref, which I'm guessing is reflexes, yes, a 77. But I honestly feel like the final thing should have been higher. To be honest, that's the one that I'm kind of disputing. I don't know who brought us down there. Tony looked at Chiva.
No, that wasn't me.
I put him a 70. I put
him. Tony, explain yourself on the reflexes.
Because
real quick,
as much as his ultra instinct body control just didn't allow him to get scored on with my high diving rating, his reflexes should have kicked in somehow. And that's just
I agree.
Just very, if I had to find a criticism about it, like if he's on point, if he's in form, he stops that. Like he moves somewhere. Like the moment he realized and the time he has to connect with the ball and realize it's not coming his way is enough to react. In my opinion, it wasn't there. It's just average. I gave him a 70. So that was my criticism. If I'm watching game film, I'm like, yeah, okay, you could have. I would have made him do a couple of extra.
What goal was this again? What play was this again that you're talking about?
For the penalty.
The first or
the final
one?
The final one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he could have. He
should have done with his hands.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
So special being 79, positioning being 83. I think we're all pretty much in agreement there. Keepers are usually lower scores than position players in FIFA 2 or EAFC, however you want to call it these days. It would put him around kind of that same range, high 70s, low 80s, depending on what you're looking at, since some of these metrics, especially positioning, handling, and diving, being the ones that are weighted heavily for goalkeepers. Anyone disputing any of these rankings besides that specific one?
No, I might have gone a little higher up. Just, I mean, the way I saw it is more of a it's a movie as well. Like
no shit, Chiva.
Yeah. No shit. We didn't put it in the lens of like it's the Mexican league. It's like, had nothing gone wrong, or the outside, like they actually dedicated to the game. They had the potential to eventually go to Europe and grow into like a higher rating. But I mean, it was pretty close to.
Yeah, I like it.
I'm there with you.
I like it. Yeah.
Well, any closing thoughts from you guys? Obviously, plugging SanDiego.Futbol, 2 Balls and a Mic, Monday nights at 8 p.m. West Coast time. These two gentlemen, you can find them there, covering everything San Diego and everything soccer. Cesar, who does not tweet, but at Cesar H.Futbol. Myself making breadstick content. And we actually do not have a settled film for the next month. We've got a couple in the mix. I think we have 2 guests that we're leaning on that Cesar and I will push on and see who we pull the trigger on for November. But let us know which ones you want in the comments that you're thinking of, and we'd love to hear from you. Cesar, any final words?
Yeah, hopefully you all enjoyed Rudo y Cursi as much as we did, and especially I'm jealous of Chiva got to watch it for the first time. I'm really curious what the next movie will be, because maybe based off the list that Drew has, we can take some wild turns
Right.
here when it comes
Pick up a crazy list.
to what movie we just watched to what might be next. But I really hope that you all enjoyed it. And like I mentioned earlier, let us know what you think about the pod. Let us know what you've liked, what you've disliked. If you want us to be like, hey, you guys should do this, you guys should do that. And either way, most importantly, just thank you so much for the support. And thank you, by the way, again, to Chiva and Tony for chatting with us and hanging out with us for a little bit here.
Yeah, no, thank you. Sounds good. I'm a fan since the episode where the concept was even formed. I've been a huge fan of this, and I'll continue following each episode. And I'm glad that there's a community. So if there's people who like this movie, talk to us about it. Clearly, it means a lot to me. Like, this is the most open I've been on these microphones in a while. Maybe very early, like almost to tears. There will be a day where I cry on the camera here, but it wasn't today. It was close. But again, I thank you guys for moving along with this and having a cool concept, and people are going to enjoy it. I really enjoy what's going on.
Yeah, can't follow that up, right? Thank you so much for having us. I mean, I had a great time watching this movie for the first time, so I'm glad I saved it. I'm glad I saved it.
Don't you?
Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you at the movies. Appreciate your time, and we love you all. Thank you, and we'll see you next month.
Deportivo Movie Club. Come and join our movie club, where Cesar and Drew have fun. Club Deportivo Movie Club.